Hi and welcome back to another video of jPlay. I am Marcus and today I'm going to walk you through a couple of rounds of Time of Crisis here. A game that has been designed by Ray Farrell and Brad Johnson and is being published by GMT Games. As some of you may know, I'm not too deep into war games per se. I do like games with a high conflict potential. I also do like games with some strong historic background or historic games in general. But what I really do like are deck building games. And here GMT really came up with a great combination of both. A relatively easy to learn war game with high conflict potential and a deck building mechanism at the core of the game per se. So each of the players starts the game with the same set of, let's say, very basic cards. So we have some Senate actions, we have some populist action, and we also have military actions or military cards. Right now you don't see those. And throughout the game you have the possibility to buy more of those cards and put them into your so-called influence deck in order to give you more, let's say, flexibility, more power, more military power, more populist power, you name it. But of course I will explain all those mechanics as I go. But Time of Crisis is not the standard deck builder per se. Whatever every card you buy, go into the discard pile. When this whatever your available deck is depleted, you shuffle your deck and then draw 5 new cards. No, that's really different because you always get to choose which cards you want to put to your hand from your available pile. And when the discard pile basically is full or your available deck is empty, you just put it on the next side to the available pile and then you get to choose again from those cards. So it's really not just whatever relying on fate, what card you may end up, you really get to choose. That's good and bad. Of course, you can make more meaningful decisions on what your next turn will be. But of course, the situation will change whatever when it's your turn again. So you may have chosen the wrong set of cards in the end. And this is really what I like about this game a lot. Today I walk you through a couple of rounds in a 3-player game. The reason for that is because it really needs some table space, and in my little home studio here I have some very limited capacities, to be honest. But really this game plays well from 2 to 4 players. Really doesn't matter which combination. It always is fun. Of course you will have, let's say, fewer of those regions available to you, but apart from that the game always feels pretty similar. So in a 3-player game you cannot place a governor in Egyptus, Africa or Hispania. They are still kind of available, you can still move through, but apart from that those are more or less out of bound areas. But apart from that all the other regions up there are entirely available. We are also, let's say, lacking one so-called barbarian tribe, and those are the nomads down in Africa. But apart from that we have the Franks, we have the Alemanni, we have the Goths, and we have the Sassanids on the right here on the board. I've already done the starting setup. So the blue player will start in Gallia, so you will start with a governor here. You will start with a little army in the capital of the region. The red player will start here in Pannonia, also with a governor on the influence track here of this region. That's always a 1 when you start the game, and also with a small army. And last but not least we have the yellow player who will start the game in Galatia, also with a governor level 1 and a small army in the capital of Galatia. The game will end when either this Diocletian event card shows up, and this is really dependent on how, let's say, good or bad you're rolling during the crisis step of each given turn, or when one of the players is the current emperor and has legacy points equal to or higher than 60 in this case. There is also, let's say, a shorter play variant where 40 points are sufficient, and 40 points is really a very good introductory scenario because you will not play it longer than whatever, maybe 2.5 to 3 hours or so. And even going to 60 points isn't really a game that will keep you occupied for the whole day. So again, it's really, let's call it a relatively straightforward and also a relatively fast-paced game, which I like a lot. Of course, turns tend to get longer. The longer you play it, you have more cards available to choose from and stuff like that. But apart from that, again, this game is really relatively straightforward, which I personally like a lot. So what we will do as part of setup is to take this Diocletian event. We take, I think, 3 more cards from the top of this event deck. We shuffle those 4 cards in total, so we don't know exactly when this deck is running out. So let's see, we will place those 4 cards to the bottom of this event deck, and then we are more or less good to go. But keep in mind that when this Diocletian event card shows up, the game is immediately over, whereas the other end game event will still allow all the other players to still play until it's back to the starting player again. So each player gets the same amount of turns. But again, this is not true when this event card shows up. So in this case, I just determined randomly that blue will be the starting player of this scenario. So he also gets to choose where to place his governor first, and all the other players would follow. And all regions which are currently ungoverned gets one of those neutral faction governors, all at level 1. So this will be the first target of the players really gaining control of whatever, Thracia or Macedonia down there, which is relatively easy to achieve. And based on the current neutral regions out there on the board, we will determine the strength of the current neutral emperor here in Italia. So whoever is the governor of Italia is also, let's say, the emperor. And really being the emperor is a big deal because you can gain a lot of victory points at the end of the game. Right now there are 6 neutral provinces out there, which means that let's say, the current emperor has, let's say, an influence of 6 overall. Whenever this goes down to 0 for a player character, we would lose, let's say, the status of being emperor. But for the neutral governor, the neutral emperor, this really doesn't have any impact. He will stay unless really a player actively is reaching out for the throne there. As part of setup, each of the players start the game with 5 cards from their available deck. All the players have the same available deck at the start of the game, so 3 blue, 3 yellow, 3 red cards. And in most cases, the choices are relatively similar for the, let's say, first 1 or 2 rounds. In this case, I really decided that one of the players starts a little bit different than the others because, again, I really want to show you most of the core mechanics in this game. I may not be able to show you everything, especially something like the Pretender up there. First of all, it takes quite some time until you can really afford this card. And then you still have to be able to play this card because there are some conditions to it. The Pretender is a very cool mechanic because you can just create your own little, I don't know, kingdom or whatnot on the board, and yeah, really make the life of the real emperor very, very difficult because he's not gaining any additional emperor turns and things like that. So this is really a great way to annoy the other players. But in this case, for the blue player, I started with 3 Senate action or Senate cards and 2 populist cards in this one. They all have a value of 1. They don't come with any special abilities whatsoever. So right now they're only producing that many, let's say, blue and yellow points for now. And what can you do with those? That's a cool thing. It's all printed on your player board here. So here are the actions that you can do with red action points. These are the actions, the Senate actions for your blue action points. And then you have, let's say, last but not least, the yellow actions for so-called populist actions. Again, right now, blue player has 3 points for blue, 2 points for yellow. And I think we should be pretty much good to go now. And the first thing that you would need to do during your turn would to go through the upkeep phase. In this case, you would remove any questor or castra markers. Right now, there aren't any at the start of the game, and I will explain those tokens to you when we get there, of course. Then you would go to the so-called crisis phase, where you would roll a 2d6 and would resolve the result on the appropriate crisis table. And there is a table for each player count available. We are right now playing with 3 players, so we would refer to the 3-player crisis table. The crisis table for 4 players is printed on the board up there, but again, there is a space to place it here, and it fits very nicely on the original position. So yeah, let's do some dice rolling. So let's take 2 dice. Red. Wow, that's a 2. Wow, that's an interesting start. Ira Diorum. And that's really an interesting start because we have to flip 1 barbarian counter in each of the homelands to the active side. So this is now getting more likely that we will see an invasion of those barbarians anytime soon. Though those were the Franks, the Alemanni. We have the Goths. And last but not least, the Sassanids. Right now we will not check for any invasion, we only have activated one of those. During each of the activation, again that's, let's say, dependent to the die roll, we would then also flip one inactive barbarian to the active side. And the more active barbarians you have in the homeland, the more likely it gets that they will do an invasion. Okay, those were the upkeep and the crisis phases, and now we come to the take action phase. Now I can use my cards however I would like to use them. And yeah, let's do some actions here. One important thing in this game is the more regions you govern, the better. That is clear. You can pretty much now use a so-called Senate action or Senate action points in order to, replace this neutral governor in any regions, and those regions don't need to be adjacent to you. This is really important piece of this game. So the blue player in Gallia does not need to go to Britannia. He can really directly try to reach out to Thracia or Macedonia here. In most cases it's beneficial to keep your provinces together because of the Pretender Empire, because of, let's say, providing protections to whatever between each region. But again, there is a possibility that you say, oh, I don't want to give whatever Thracia here to Pannonia or to the red player, or maybe Asia to the yellow player. But I think in this case we try to play it conservatively. So I think I, or the blue player, wants to get control over Britannia. Therefore, he first has to recruit a new governor. And the cost for this new governor are, let's say, blue points equal to the printed cost on the selected counter. And all of those governors have a value on the back of their counter. So they're reaching from 1 to 5. So the first governor you buy, other than your starting governor, costs 1, then 2, then 3. If you can afford, you can directly go for the 5 governor here, because maybe it may be wise, or you cannot really use leftover blue points or whatnot. So you would say, oh, let's go over to whatever, buying the more expensive governor, so I can then go for the cheaper one during my next turn or so. This is always possible. But right now I think I will also play it relatively conservative. So I will spend 1 point, so I will play this card here, and this allows me to hire or recruit this governor. This governor goes into my available leaders box, from where I can use it anytime. The cool thing about this game is whenever you are losing either a governor or one of your generals, they always go back to the available leaders pool, so you don't have to recruit them again. Next, we want to place our governor, and I think we would stick to our original plan and want to place the governor in Britannia. Therefore, we have to replace a governor that's currently present there. Any region can only ever hold 1 governor at the same time. So in order to replace the governor, we would now need 2 votes. Always double the amount of votes of the current support level of that region. Right now the support level is at 1. So in order to replace that governor here, we would need to create 2 votes. How do we get votes? We would do the place governor action here. Therefore we have to spend again blue points, and for each point we are spending we would be allowed to roll 1 6-sided die. Replacing a neutral governor is relatively easy, or let's say creating a vote for a neutral governor, because all results from 1 to 6 are votes for us. It's not that easy when you want to replace the governor of an actual player, because then 1 votes do not count. So in this case we would say, okay, we need 2 votes, so we need 2 blue dice, because that's the minimum amount we have to roll. But keep in mind, this game also comes with so-called exploding dice. So whenever you would roll a 6, and that's true for this replace governor action, this is true for any military action, so when you do really some actual fighting, a 6 is an exploding die. It allows you to reroll that again. So there is a chance that we would only play 1 card here and would hope for a 6, because this would allow us to roll twice, or this die again, and then we would have our 2 votes. But again, the start of the game is really key. So in this case I would play 2 blue points that would allow me to roll 2 dice, and as I already explained, in order to replace a neutral governor, a 1 is totally sufficient. So we roll those dice, we don't really need anything. In this case, yeah, that's definitely good enough. Those are 2 votes. So we take our newly recruited governor and place him onto this influence track here. Normally you would lose 1 level of influence when replacing a governor, but this can not be under 1. So we would just replace this marker here. So now we are also governing Britannia on top of Gallia. This goes back to the let's say, normal pile, there are good chances that you will lose regions throughout the game because of lack of support and whatnot, and then there will always be a neutral governor placed in this region again. Now we have spent 3 of our 5 cards already. Those are all our 3 blue cards. Keep in mind our starter deck doesn't have more than 3 blue cards here. Everything that's now remaining are those 2 populous action points in this case. And I think with those 2 points we want to increase our support level. Keep in mind we can all do those actions, let's say, repeated times during your turn. Whenever you can pay for those, it's perfectly fine. So if I would have liked, I could have spent 1 Senate point to go for the level 1 governor and then the remaining 2 Senate points to go for a level 2 governor, but that's not always the best thing to do. In this case now, we want to increase the support level in Gallia here. In order to do that, we have to spend 2 populous points, so always the number we want to get at 2. So in this case, that's pretty easy peasy. We would play our 2 populous cards, and this would allow us to increase the support level in Gallia by 1. So overall, the blue player now has a combined support level of 3, and this value is really important when it comes to buying or purchasing new influence cards here. This really determines how, let's say, many cards or what value of cards you would be able to buy. But the blue player is now out of actions or action points, so we would place all those 5 cards to our discard pile, as basically one of the last things that you would do during your turn would be then to draw up to 5 cards again. And this is also different to the standard or average deck builder. You are not, let's say, putting all cards into your discard pile. You are still allowed to keep some of the cards for the next turn, but you will always get to choose. Next we would go into the support check phase. So we would check if any of the blue players' regions are, let's say, being threatened by barbarians or things like that, or mob counters and so on. But in this case, that's pretty straightforward. We can more or less skip this phase. We are not going to expand a pretender empire because right now there aren't any pretenders out there. And then it's already time to gain our first legacy points. We would gain 1 legacy point for each governed provinces for improvement being pretender and or the emperor. Right now we only have, let's say, legacy points for regions we are currently governed. That's 1 region, 2 regions. So blue player just earned his first 2 legacy points, but this will pretty much be true for all the other players as well. And here you can really see that without doing really much, you're already getting a lot of victory points. So getting to 40 victory points in total, or in this case, sorry, legacy points, isn't really tough at all, because you will always gain points for improvements you're building. So normally it's really easy to get at least whatever 4 or 5 points per given turn at some point in time. Next, we would be allowed to place any unplayed card into my discard pile, and then I would be allowed to either trash cards from the discard pile, or we would be allowed to buy new cards. And I think in this case, we are not trashing any cards yet, we only want to buy cards. And I already explained that to you. Those are the cost or the base cost of each given card. And the way how I am producing resources is by just, let's say, summing up my support levels in all regions I govern. Right now that's 3, so I would be definitely able to go for this tribute card here. In theory, I could also go directly to the, let's say, level 3 card here for 3 costs, but here is, let's say, a little caveat. In order to buy a card of, let's say, level 3 in this case, I would also have to have control of 3 regions. If I have fewer than 3 regions, the price of this card is doubled. So right now I'm only controlling 2 regions, so the price of this card would be 6. Totally out of reach. And the same would be true for this card here, which would be now, let's say, had a price of 8 in total, so totally out of my reach. There is also, let's say, an additional point to keep in mind. The first card you buy is always the base price. So let's say if I go for this card, that's 2 influence points that I need to spend from my, let's say, virtual pile of influence points. If I would go for, let's say, a second tribute card, which I could do if I want to, would be then an additional cost of 1. So the next card I'm going to buy would be then 3 in this case. But of course, I'm not bound to any blue cards or red card or yellow cards. I get to choose. But I think in this case, it's not a bad idea to go for this tribute card here, because it allows you to flip all barbarian counters of a single tribe to their inactive side in any one province. This can really help you a big deal, because during the, let's say, support check phase towards the end of each given turn, you may lose, let's say, support levels in your regions where there are barbarian active counters present. So I think this is really something that is not a bad card. So let's get this tribute card here and place it into the available pile. Last thing to do during your turn is to flip any inactive barbarians in your province to the active side. We would add mob counters of each of your provinces which already have mobs. Right now that's not the case, and then we would refill the hand to 5 cards. Right now there are only 4 cards left in our deck, so those are 3 red cards and 1 remaining populous cards. And now we would just take this discard pile and put it next to the available pile. And again, I now get to choose which my 5th card would be. So I can directly go to the level 2 tribute card if I want to. And I think that's really not a bad thing. So why not go for it? I think this should be the top card here, right? So let's place it right into our hand. Let's keep the remaining cards in the available pile. And this concludes the turn of the very first player. That was a lot of talking, but I really wanted to show you the core mechanics as detailed as possible. I think as of now we can speed things up. So this is now the turn of the yellow player. Again, we would go to the upkeep phase. Right now there aren't any quest or Castra markers, and next we would roll for the crisis. So let's see what we get. That's a 3. Those are francs may get activated. The first thing that will happen, we would activate an additional counter in the homeland of the region. Next, we would roll the dice again. Again, we have to roll a black and a white die, and the black die will tell us if the francs will activate, and the white die will show us where they would move if they would activate. How do they activate? If you would now roll a 1 or a 2, because right now we have 2 active francs in their homeland, they would then try or will invade one of the countries. So let's see what we get. And yes, wow, they will get activated. That was really quick. Now we check the white die. White die is a 1, so they will now invade Britannia. And then they would go into Gallia. In this case, we would move 2 counters, active counters from the Franks to Britannia. There is a limit for each and every barbarian tribe in each of the region, and that is 3. So if we would have more than 3 active Franks available, remainder would then go to Gallia. And if there are still a surplus of counters available because of whatever former turns or whatnot, the rest would go back to their homeland. But right now that's already a bad start for the blue player, because he could really lose now his, let's say, region up there in Britannia, because at the end of the, let's say, action phase of the blue player, he might lose 1 level of support here, because there are barbarian tribes present, active barbarian tribes available. Good thing is he just bought the tribute card here, which allows him to deactivate the counters of 1 tribe in a region. So I think right now he should be okay for at least 1 more turn, but at some point in time he really has to deal with those guys. Now we come to the action phase of the yellow player, and this will be totally similar to what the blue player just did. So first of all, he will spend 1 blue point to get his level 1 governor into his available leader's point. Then he will play 2 blue cards in order to replace a governor, so he would be allowed to roll 2 dice, so 1 per icon or number here. And I think right now he wants to go to Asia, so he will play his 2 populous points. In theory he would have to roll those dice, but again, all numbers do count. Well, that's cool. So those are 2 votes. This is an exploding die, so he's allowed to roll an additional die. Let's take 1 here. Okay, so in total he had 3 votes. He only needed 2 in this case, double the amount of current support level, so he would be allowed to replace that governor here in Asia. Oops, I just noticed I showed the wrong cards. So of course those are the Senate action points I need. Those 2 action points here I will also use in order to increase the support level in one of my regions, and right now I will go for Galatia. This was already the action phase for the yellow player. He doesn't need to do any support checks. There aren't any pretender empires. We would gain legacy, and again those are 2 points because he currently governs 2 regions. He is not trashing any cards. Right now he has a combined support level of 3, so he could also go for with those cards easily. And I think for him he will also go for an additional or for a tribute card at the start of the game. Those are really, really powerful. Then he will basically refill his hand. All the other steps are not necessary. So 4 cards. Again, the discard pile goes to the available pile. And I think, why not? Let's also take the tribute card into his hand. The remainder of the cards go to the available pile. And yeah, that concludes the turn of the yellow player. Last but not least for this round is the red player. Again, we are not seeing any upkeep steps, so we can directly jump into the crisis step. So let's see what he rolls. That's a 7, so we would see our very first event. How cool is that? Okie dokie, let's see what we get. Plague of Cyprian. Until the next event is drawn, the number of hits inflicted by both sides in a battle is increased by 1. Wow, that's a tough one. So really going after fights can be really devastating, to be honest. Okay, we have to think about this. And keep in mind, this card now really stays in fact until the next, or one of the next players is rolling a 7 again, because this is the only time when a new event card is being played. For red, I decided to do things a little bit differently, just to show you some more actions. Normally, I think it's not a bad idea to really go for a new region and then whatever increase the support level in one of your regions. But you don't have to do that, because you still get 2 support points anyway by controlling 2 regions. So I think overall that's really not a bad idea at all, but you should really go for at least 2 regions because you need more cards, that is clear. So in this case we will do pretty much the same. So we will spend 1 point in order to gain our first, let's say, normal governor into our available leaders pool, and we will then also spend 2 of those Senate points in order to replace the governor in a region. In theory, you can also do that directly at Italia. And one thing I forgot to do, or I forgot to do it twice right now, I recognize, because the support level of Italia is always dependent on the number of regions that whatever the current emperor controls. Right now that's a neutral emperor, and the neutral emperor already has lost 2 regions, Britannia and Asia. So the support level of Italia just went down by 2. So in order to get the next emperor, you would have to get 8 votes in this case. So overall, that's really something that's achievable at some point in time when you have some more of those cards. So in theory, even the red player could now go for it and hope for a lot of 6s in order to come up with 8 votes. But of course, right now, that's not a good idea. One thing that you also have to keep in mind, each unit of your own unit that's currently present in the capital of the region you try to replace the governor also reduce the amount of votes by 1. So if now the red player would move his army to Italia's capital, Rome in this case, then he would only need to come up with 7 votes, but still that's, let's say, not really realistic. So in this case we would keep it also straightforward, and I think in this case let's go to Thracia here. So again, he has spent 2 of his remaining blue action points. He would roll his dice in theory, so those are 2 votes, perfectly fine for him. We would replace the governor here. This goes back to the cup, and this time I won't forget again, the support level of Italia dropped an additional point. So the next player to go there would only have to come up with 6 votes in order to get the emperor. And yeah, I think we are coming really close to, let's say, realistic results. So at the latest, when Italia's level is at 2 or 3, you should really start thinking about gaining control over Italia, because for each turn that you are emperor, you can then move ahead your emperor turns, and whoever had the most emperor turns at the end of the game would gain 10 additional legacy points. This friendly tie, so if there is a tie, both of the players get the 2 points. I think second player gets 7 and the third player gets 3. But of course, you still had to be emperor for at least 1 turn in order to gain any, let's say, benefits out of this. Those were all of his blue actions, and then he has 2 red action points. So I think we will now recruit a general. This costs us also 1 point for each number that's printed on the general. So the first general has a number of 1. They're also reaching from 1 to 5. So this was 1 point. And I think it would also be a good idea to now create a new army. And right now this would also cost us 1 additional red point. So we would now take this general we were just recruited. And we would be allowed to place this general with a legion free of charge, full side up, pretty much to a region we are currently controlling. And I think right now we want to do that in Thracia here. The first legion to an army, so like creating an army, is relatively cheap. As I mentioned, you only need to spend 1 point. If you would want to add legions to an existing army, this would cost us that many red points, as there would be legions after we have finished the action. So in order to place a second legion to this army, we would have to spend 2 red points. But those were all of the actions for the red player. And as I mentioned, we want to play things a little bit differently for one of the players. So he will not go for a tribute marker. I think in this case, he will go for this quester card here. First of all, it provides him 2 populous points, and you can really use those populous points quite well during the game. And he's also allowed to play a quester, and the quester really makes it more difficult for the other players to roll for replacing your governor in a region where a quester is present. So that's always a good thing. So let's take this card. Let's put it into his discard pile. We are not doing anything else. Of course, we would still gain the legacy. I nearly forgot that. Of course, he's also controlling 2 regions right now, though they all have 2 legacy points at this point in time. And then we would fill up his hands. So I think he's left with 1 army point here, which may be a bad thing, to be honest. Not sure if I can do something with it, but I think on top of this we would also place our quester card into his hand. So overall, his next turn will be pretty dominated by populous actions, which isn't a bad thing. So he will definitely be able to generate more victory points with this selection down there. And yeah, this was the very first round of Time of Crisis. I think I will call it a day for now, but I will definitely record at least 1 more video of this awesome game in order to show you some more of the mechanics. Hopefully really also a fight, maybe a fight against those barbarian tribes up there in Britain. Maybe we will see some more invasions or so, as we still have the Alemanni or the Goths or the Sassanids to the eastern of the board. So overall, we will definitely see some very cool additional actions taking place, because as of rounds 2 and 3, things really start to feel different for each of the, let's say, players. During round 1 or turn 1 and turn 2, things are relatively similar. So you want to extend your empire, you want to prepare your army, what the red players did. But really, as at the latest, as of round 2 or maybe round 3, really things start to really feel different for each of the players, all depending on the situations where the barbarians are. So right now the blue players already faced with the barbarian threat out there, whereas the red and the yellow player are still relatively relaxed. They have some active barbarians next to them, but apart from that, right now they have not invaded their region. So right now that's already starting to feel very different. It also goes back to which event cards come up, who will be the first emperor. This will then be, let's say, the guy with the target on his back and things like that. So overall, really things will start to evolve pretty soon. I really hope you enjoyed my little walkthrough of Time of Crisis so far. Look out for my second episode. I would at least record 1 more, not sure, maybe even 2 more. Let's see how things turn out. And yeah, hope to see you soon in one of my other videos. And until then, bye bye.